And that took the main part of the blast. Peppered me on my right side, threw me onto Gregory. Dazed for a sec, kind of shook it off, then focused back out to the west and called Gregory and like, brother, I can't hold this position. Like, I'm out of ammo. They got me outflanked. It's one of those moments where it's just like, shoot.
Thank you for making time. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm super excited about this.
I've known of you for a while. I got your book. I'm halfway through, which now is becoming my sad truth. It's my mantra for all things.
I'm telling you, man, you got to listen to them. You can zip through them faster.
You know what, though, man? There's something. Would you rather read a great book or listen to a good book well read?
I don't know. Like I said, I'm a product of C's get degrees. I limped through high school. Every book it seemed like I wanted to read was not part of our accelerated reader program.
Pop-ups usually aren't.
You know, I tried to do a book report on Spy versus Spy once because it was actually published in a
Mad Magazine.
Oh yeah,
the best.
Yeah, I got an F on that one somehow. To me, it's got to be a good book for me to get in, and then I'm all in, and I want to read it to myself. I grew up, like I said, in a tiny town in just Northern California.
Which one?
Lake City or Cedarville. I got another story about that.
Is it Lake City or Cedarville?
Well,
it sounds complicated.
It is complicated. We grew up in a valley called Surprise Valley. So you had Fort Bidwell, Lake City, Cedarville, and Eagleville, and we all had to transit toward Cedarville to go to school. And I can always brag to this day that I graduated in the top 14 of the 15 kids. I graduated my senior year.
One more surprise out of Surprise Valley. You're in the top 15.
But like I said, when I met Gary Antes, he wasn't even my direct kind of supervisor. He was the commander's gunner. But he was at NCO that you just knew he was a leader of men. And as a young PFC, I looked at him. I'm like, I want to be him someday. And so everything I addressed kind of my leadership style off from came directly from him. And he taught me great lessons like good leaders don't expect everybody to change their ways to them. They know each of their guys individually. And never tell someone to do it just because I said so. Don't fall back on just because I told you to do it. He's like, always have a reason you're telling them. And always make guys feel listened to. Because even the greatest ideas can come from the dumbest privates.
How do you know? What parent manual is out there that got passed around that somehow resonated enough with moms and dads to literally rely on that for everything? Because I said so. Like, it doesn't work when you're 6, it doesn't work when you're 16, and it doesn't work when you're 26. I
mean, there's always, I think, going to be that one-off occasion where you just need to throw that out there. But for me, it was always, there's got to be a task and purpose, and especially young men want that purpose, direction, motivation. Like, if you don't give them that, they're going to go find it elsewhere, or it's going to create a divide between you and, like I said, I was in the military so long, I always call them young men, boys and stuff. That would create a division of my biggest quality I wanted in my guys was loyalty. Duty, I know, would get them to do their job. Loyalty would get them to go above and beyond anything that was asked of them.
So interesting, because I think what you're talking about are bottom-up solutions, non-cookie cutter approaches to getting a result. But the military always struck me as the epitome of a top-down organization where there's forms and there's protocol and there's chain of command and all of these other things that are, I know, important, but balancing all of that together seems like a hot mess.
The structure that I went through was, you've got that chain of command. You've got, here's the right way, the wrong way to do things. I always liked that the right, the wrong way, and hey, Lieutenant, look the other way thing to do things. And what I always took out of the military is there is that structure, but I think that's what separated the U.S. military from any other military you've ever seen in the history of man. But they want every soldier to think for themselves and to know that those small teams, that victory can be decided by one person on that battlefield. It can easily be lost by the top general making just a error mistake of some sorts. but a victory could be won by the lowest soldier because they are thinking outside the box.
So interesting. Well, obviously that dynamic is very much at work in Red Platoon. Your book, at least the half I've read, is riveting. I swear to God, I'm going to finish it this week.
I can tell you I survive at the end.
Spoiler alert, Clint made it out. But dude, by the hair of your chinny chin chin, that was a close one. I don't know how much you want to talk about this, because at base, at least it feels like what you're really doing with this is dissecting one of the most consequential battles in Afghanistan, certainly one of the craziest. And it unfolds over the course of just a couple of days, but you really take your time with this and you put the viewer, or the reader in this case, or the listener, if you will, right smack in it. It's a great job.
Well, that has to do entirely with the guys I served with. Shortly after receiving the medal, like I said,
The Medal of Honor.
It was a whirlwind.
Does it embarrass you to say it?
It does at times. I shouldn't say at times. It just, to me, it's a bittersweet thing, because as much as people call you a hero and want to celebrate you, to me, it's like I didn't bring 8 guys home. Like a leadership failure.
You lost
almost.
8 men.
You know, so it's that bittersweet. It's humbling to be acknowledged for that, but it's also, I had 50 other guys there that day. I had 8 that gave up their lives so I could be here. So as much as I've been the one to be presented with the medal and now wear it, I don't wear it for me. I'm the caretaker of it, and it's for all of those guys that I served with. It's for all those men and women that are still serving today. It's for those that'll put on that uniform tomorrow and continue on. For every American that's in this country that's being givers and not takers. Like I said, my big thing is service to country doesn't have to come from wearing the uniform. It comes from just being a good person and giving back more than you're taking.
When did you enlist and why?
So I enlisted in 99. I came from, like I said, a military background. My grandfather served World War II. He started off in the cavalry back as the Army was kind of transitioning from horses to mechanical. So once they were downgrading, getting rid of some of the horses, he grew up as a rancher farmer running heavy equipment, so they turned him into a combat engineer. So he went over to Europe, survived Normandy Beach landings, Battle of the Bulge, did his entire time over in Europe.
Front row seat to all that.
My dad, he ended up serving 2 tours in Vietnam as an infantryman. My oldest brother, like I said, he initially joined the Army. Had a break in service, was going to come back and try to be a California Highway Patrol trooper. That was back when, that was at mid-90s. That plan didn't work out for him, so he went back in, joined the Air Force. He just retired from the Air Force, 2 years ago. Second oldest brother, he was kind of weird, so he joined the Marines. He did, 4 years down at Camp Pendleton. And so by the time it was, I was coming to the end of my high school career. I said me and school didn't get along.
High school career.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, that's where I learned fake it till you make it. Just do just enough to get by.
Let me ask you something, just a quick sidebar though. Was your frustration with high school, you think, maybe related to that one-size-fits-all approach we were talking about? Like, did you need to be talked to, educated, engaged with in a different way?
I thrived at anything that was hands-on during my educational growing up. Like my senior year, I had 3 English classes because I refused to take them throughout the course of my high school career. I think I had 2 PEs and ag mechanic, shop, and welding. Like I had no problem with
ag, shop, and welding.
Welding and PE, but yeah, those 3 senior English classes really kind of kicked my butt there at the end.
It needs 3. It's just
well, that's
on.
what happens when you don't take them during your freshman, junior, or sophomore year.
They accumulate.
They kind of self-inflicted. And for me, that's what kind of irritated me with school was I think I was from the generation where it got shoved down your throat. If you don't go to college, you're not going to be successful. And growing up, like I said, my dad was a heavy equipment operator out in Washoe County, Nevada. We raised alfalfa. We raised dairy cows. My dad was the only one that would work on like windmills and not like the ones that produce energy, the ones that suck up water for livestock.
Right.
He was the only one that could work on windmills in the entire state of Northern California, Southern Oregon, Northern Nevada. So I'd wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, would go out, fix windmills on the weekends. He wasn't running heavy equipment for Washoe County. He never, ever told us to go to college. He always just said, go learn to do something.
A skill that's in demand.
And so when I joined the Army, my thought was, I'm tired of milking cows and I'm tired of digging fence posts. That is not the life I want. I want to go see the world. It's 99, so we didn't have a whole lot going on. And I wanted to follow in the footsteps of my dad, my grandfather, because all of their stories, they never talked about combat. They never talked about war. They talked about the buddies they served with and the shenanigans they got into. And it was always those stories that...
We few, we happy few, right? I mean, that's, God, I look at men today, young men in particular, who just seem, not to paint with too broad a brush, but lost and looking for meaning and not finding it in their screens, not finding purpose, right? And so just cocooned and wrapped up inside, and
that's why I think like high school sports is a great thing for young men and women.
Friday Night Lights was a real thing.
Yeah, that camaraderie, just having that challenge, because I don't know, I like to call it kind of the app-based purchases. You can just instantly get that upgrade with a little bit of money, but where's the reward in that? And only said my best moments in life have came out of some of the worst things I had to go through, because it gave it much more meaning when things are going good.
A crucible. Okay, but it's 1999, so we're pre-9/11.
Yep.
You decide to see the world, and you go to your dad, who has already been there and already done that. And what words of wisdom might he have for you?
Well, I'm 17 years old. Again, not because I was super smart. My birthday's just in August, so I'm on the verge of graduating. My graduation present was luggage, so I got the hint. Very loud and clear. And I tell him, hey, I've already talked to the recruiter. I'm going to join the Army. And my dad just looks at me and he shakes his head and he's like, knowing I'm 17, he's got to sign. He just shakes his head. He's like, I'm not going to sign for you. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this SOB is wanting one more free work a summer out of me because I'm the youngest of the three boys.
Can't say goodbye to my cheap labor.
Yeah.
Cows to milk.
Yeah, I worked every summer for $100. That was my salary for the summer work. I never seen that $100, but I always got told about it, and that's what bought my hand-me-down jeans and all my school clothes for the next year. But very quickly he followed up. He's like, Clint, look, there's not a whole lot going on in the world. Maybe not tomorrow, and maybe not in 20 years. If you put that uniform on, you'll have to go and do and see things that no one should have to go do and see. Said, I'm 17 years old. I'm thinking, he just wants to keep me around for another summer. Like I said, he never shared his time, any of his stories of Vietnam growing up. I didn't understand any of that. I'm just being a punk 17-year-old kid that used to complain that my life was horrible because the nearest McDonald's was in Susanville, California, 45 minutes away. And how tough of a world that was that I'd never had McDonald's in my life.
And you had never really seen anything on the national or the global stage that would make your,
Well, growing up, we had Desert Storm, the 100-Hour War, so I got to watch that, and that was,
Video game.
We're there and done. And
yeah, that was easy.
Yep. So life is good. I said, he just said, you'll turn 18 and you'll sign on your own accord. So day of my 18th birthday, I went back to the recruiter, signed up, and the other advice my dad said, hey, if you're going to join, don't go infantry. Go learn to do something that will get you paid afterwards.
Don't tell me, I'm keen to guess. You signed on the well, wait a minute.
No. I'm a little lazy, and I don't like to walk very many places, so I went and I joined Armor. So I was going to be on tanks. And I came back and I told my dad, I listened to you. I'm not going to be infantry. I'm going to be armor. And he just comes back and he's like, well, why the hell would you do that? You're just the biggest target on the battlefield now. It's like, there's no one pressing you, Dad. Like, every choice is not going to be.
Obviously, tough audience. All right. So you're in for, well, let's see, 2 years before 9/11.
Yep.
Were you stateside all the way up?
No, first duty station was Germany because I wanted to go there because my brother had been stationed there when he was in the Army. Like I said, my granddad had spent time there after World War II. My grandmother, without missing a beat, when I shipped off to go to Germany, the only thing she said is, "Hey, your granddad spent some time over there, so if anybody looks like your uncle or your mom, will you let me know?" Like I said, I just wanted to travel, but as soon as I got to Germany, my unit I went to was already pre-deployed downrange to Kosovo at the time. And that was back after, Milosevic and all of the genocide stuff. And that was kind of the first dose of what my dad was telling me about, of going and doing and seeing things that no one should have to go do and see. So as soon as I got to Germany, it was a week later, I caught up with the rest of my unit down in Kosovo, out of, I believe it was Camp Bondsteel at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we started running, doing security patrols and running Albanians through Serbian towns, escorting them to go get fuel for their tractors, and Serbs through Albanian towns so they could have fuel for their tractors to plant their fields, because if they didn't have a military escort, they were going to get killed. And I thought that was kind of the first light bulb moment where it's like, man, I am such a punk kid that I used to complain that 45 minutes away was the nearest McDonald's. And how good was life that I never once, every time I was sitting there running the swather and had to go fill up with diesel, ever thought anyone would ever try to shoot at me.
You went from milking cows to risking your life so people could milk cows.
Yeah.
Basically. You're a corporal at this point?
Nope. PFC. Basic training. Like I said, I joined as a PV nothing. It was one of those things. The Army was the greatest thing. They told you where to be, what to be in. And you didn't have to be the most squared away guy. You just had to be a little more less messed up than the guy to your left and right.
That's right.
I mean, it's not a difficult thing. We're not all, special forces, Green Berets, or Navy SEALs. It's just, you just had to be not as messed up as the guy to your left and right in particular moments.
Yeah. You don't have to outrun your buddy. You got to outrun you don't have to outrun the bear. You got to outrun your buddy. Right. All right. So you're just kind of Forrest Gumping your way through the whole thing then.
Yep. And it just excelled for me. My time in the military, I wouldn't say it was all easy, but it came very natural. Everything I did was very natural, and it just kind of flowed. And what I thought was just going to be 4 years, well, it's like started my family, and then realized had opportunity to go to Korea and do a reenlistment for there. At that time, said I did the 4 years in Germany, already re-upped to go to Korea, and of course 9/11 had already kicked off. Knowing we were on tanks, it was all going on in Afghanistan, and we learned some good lessons from the Russians that tanks don't go to Afghanistan. So
right.
I thought to myself, well, probably won't have an opportunity, especially since I'm going to Korea.
Really? So you didn't think you were going to wind up there, right in the wake of?
On the path I was on at that time, no.
Yeah.
Just the way it lined up, because at that time in Korea, it was a hardship deployment. And we had permanent units there that were waiting for the North to come south still. So when I was on my way to Korea, that's when the ground war in Iraq kicked off. And I'm like, well, crap, I've got 18 months minimum on this next enlistment that I'll be in Korea. And I had a guaranteed return assignment to Fort Irwin, California, which Irwin for the Army is a training center, a not deployable center. So that's where you train everybody else up to go to combat.
So you're saying crap because you think you're not going to be in the fight?
Yep.
And you want to be in the fight?
Well, that's what I think everyone signed up for, or at least in my eyes. When I signed up, I was wanting to. I had a great First Sergeant Olvera that had a great quote, and he's like, the only thing you guys do is just waste taxpayer dollars training to do your job. The only time you actually do your job is when you get shot at.
Yeah.
That's always kind of the desire. You want to test your mettle. You want to see if I can really, as I call it, like have that Braveheart moment. Could I actually have that Braveheart moment if the stuff's hitting the fan? Do I have what it takes personally to rise up and face evil and overcome that challenge? So on a personal level, it was like the path I was currently on wasn't going to take me there.
That's super interesting, man. The Braveheart moment, back to what we were saying before about 7 million able-bodied men currently sitting out of the workforce right now because they're consumed by their screens and not tormented or agitated by the prospect of having the very moment you're describing. Some people get the appetite and some people don't, I guess.
And I don't know what the answer to that is, as far as, is that self-inflicted because as every generation comes through, you want the next one to have it better than you, but you almost make it so comfortable that You take away that discipline of failure?
I guess I think it's probably pretty complex, but I would bet too that there's probably something in you that looks back up the gene pool and goes, well, he did it, and he did it, and they did it. I mean, that has to be powerful in some way, I would think.
I mean, like I said, the two of the hardest and most respected guys I knew were my granddad and my dad. I remember one summer working out with my granddad where he fell off the top of the haystack, and we know he broke all the ribs on his right side. Oh, but he was the type of man you don't go to the hospital unless you're dying, and that's how he was until he passed away. But when he went to the hospital, he was there for a week before he passed away. That was the same summer I watched him wrap this 4.5-inch belt around his chest and his arm and continue to work the rest of the summer, because if he didn't, obviously wasn't going to sell enough alfalfa and not raise enough beef to provide for the family. Just tough as nails. Like I said, he went through World War II, went through the Great Depression. One of our punishments, if we messed up on the farm, I can't tell you how many nails I had to straighten because he wouldn't throw a single one away. We had 5-gallon buckets, and he'd be there with the hammer and the anvil just straightening old nails out. And at the time, like I said, I used to hate that stuff. But looking back, if it wasn't for all of that, those little things, I don't think it would have put me in the position of where I am today.
Well, at some point, remind me to circle back and make the point of the fabulous metaphor of straightening nails with training men and leading them. We don't have to go through every line of your curriculum vitae, but somehow or another, there you are in Afghanistan. And how did you wind up at what, according to your book, is probably, I was going to say the last outpost anybody would ever want to be on, unless, of course, you're looking for a fight, which it sounds like you might have been. And so I don't even know how to describe what
it's one
Keating,
of those.
right?
It's one of those cases. Yeah, Cop Keating kind of came about.
COP standing for
a combat outpost. Sorry, I'm going to use a lot more acronyms than I probably should sometimes. And it was one of those things where in the military, that was just it was a natural kind of resupply point in the terrain that early on during the invasion of Afghanistan, when we were pushing north, that was just a natural stop where they could land and drop more ammo, more water, because the rest of that valley was just so inaccessible. When the ground war in Iraq kicked off in 2003, there's one thing we learned: it's very hard to fight a two-front war. You only have so many bullets, so many boots, so many helicopters. You got to split your forces. So eventually, the Army had planned to continue to push north, but until we could get things handled over in Iraq and get forces reshifted, we don't want to give up the terrain we had. So what was supposed to be a temporary thing was turned into, let's just hold it, and we'll get back to there eventually. Well, 6 years later, you find us there.
Yeah.
And a little more got added, and it's one of those, that's what really blew me away, is like everybody knew that location was less than ideal.
Now you're a staff sergeant?
Yep. This would be coming up on my 3rd combat deployment. I'd been in for over 10 years at this point, so I had quite a bit of experience under my belt. I'd been in some other dicey and hairy situations, nothing like that though. One of the things I love to do, I love writing handwritten letters. I hate emails and texting and technology. It's just weird for me. But
you really are a hard case, aren't you?
Yeah.
I get it, man. I could see your dad looking. I get it. All right.
So I remember when we first got there, I wrote my grandma. My granddad had passed away at this point. So I wrote my Grandma Smith a letter home, and it was just, hey, Grandma, we're here. The morale's high. The guys are looking good. 12 months here, and we'll be back home soon. This place is beautiful. It reminds me of growing up. Every morning I get to look up these gorgeous mountains. It reminds me of the Sierra Nevadas. Love you lots. Talk to you soon. A couple of weeks later, Grandma sent me a letter back, and the first line in that letter just said, what the hell are you doing? Look it up. Everybody knows you take the high ground. Like my grandma knew that this location
Yeah, you should explain to people like Keating's positioning and why you said it.
if we're looking at this coffee cup here, like it's set all the way down at the bottom of that thing. The mountains, all 4 sides, are landings. And the only way in and out was by helicopter. The road that used to be somewhat accessible had long been taken over by the Taliban and degraded enough that the outpost was named Combat Outpost Keating after Lieutenant Ben Keating, who unfortunately had died in a vehicle rollover trying to move military vehicles back to FOB Boston.
What is it with vehicles rolling over? Isn't that what killed Patton?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's just one of the nature of the beast sometimes. And
not to go all squirrel on it, but it's just so. It's not the way you're supposed to die. I mean, you're not supposed to die, but in a vehicle accident with combat going on around you, it's just
There's no rhyme or reason though. Sometimes
it's a dangerous place, and everything's dangerous.
Everything's dangerous. It was So the only way in and out was by helicopter, and unfortunately, there wasn't enough room inside of our position to land helicopters, so we always had to land them literally in between two rivers. They had to cross a little bridge to get over to, so all your supplies got dropped outside of your kind of secure area. It's never one or two things that are wrong.
Disaster scenarios, right?
It's a buildup of things. And we'd been there for about 3 months, and like I said, it was pretty typical. Once a day would take some sort of indirect fire, direct fire from the enemy. It wasn't out of the norm. You'd have a week of force protection where you'd be guarding the perimeter of the base, and the other platoon would be doing patrols, trying to get out and see where the enemy's coming in at, try to influence them somehow. At that time, though, it was a combination of every unit that was coming into that place got smaller and smaller. So to put in perspective, we weren't an infantry platoon. An infantry platoon's coming in at like 40-something guys. We're a scout platoon. We're the eyes and the ears of the commander. We like to brag that we're the jack of all trades, masters of none. Our list of stuff that we do is long and exclusive, and we always get to brag to the infantry. We do way more with way less. Mm-hmm. So they'd have 40 guys. We'd have maybe 18.
So how many were under your command?
At that time, I was the acting section sergeant, so I had about 8 guys under me.
Okay. And total number of people at Keating?
Total number at Keating was about 54, give or take sometimes some of the headquarters elements shifting in and out. We had a contingent of about 3 to 4 Latvian advisors, I guess you'd almost call them, Lucky and Captain Agree and them, and they were mainly helping the Afghan army kind of get set up and get trained and be their kind of overseers. We had about 40-something Afghan army guys. The first group of Afghan army guys were awesome. Those guys, you could tell, had been through combat. They were battle tested. They wanted to go out and they wanted to take the fight to the enemy. The guys that replaced them, not so much. You tried to take them out on patrol and they weren't high on hashi. That was kind of the constant turnover. So I got to work with both ends of the spectrum on Afghani fighters. Some were super great. The guys we ended up having that day were not, unfortunately. And I said we all knew less than ideal conditions. Resupply was going to be a nightmare. Reinforcements was going to be a nightmare. We're getting attacked pretty much every day. We knew there were some hiccups and vulnerabilities in our perimeter defense. We knew also that we might be leaving, we might be staying. You didn't quite know, and because of the indecision of that, what you'd need for resupplies to really reinforce it were kind of denied, because if you were leaving, you'd have to remove all that out. So it was always kind of a constant battle of, hey, can we get reinforcements to secure the front gate? Hey, can we get some more sandbags to build a new battle position? Can we get this? Can we get that? And sometimes it was yes, sometimes it was no, and you were constantly kind of switching back and forth almost weekly on, oh, no, the Army knows this is a bad spot. We're going to get you out of here.
Do you feel like you knew it was coming, or did you know it was coming?
No.
In hindsight?
In hindsight, yeah. During the time, no. You always thought it would happen to someone else. That was the thing, and that was tough, was to try and beat back the complacency. Because like I said, sometimes they'd show up one morning and they'd fire magazine of AK rounds into you, and then they're gone for the day. Sometimes it would be multiple, hit you on the west side with some sporadic gunfire, and then pound you with the B-10 on the east side.
Are you taking casualties with it, or is it just pot shots? And
we had taken, Sergeant Jacobs was one of our first kind of big casualties. They fired the B-10. It's a recoilless. I think it's 82 millimeter. It's an old, like, World War II recoilless rifle that the Taliban had that they basically had set it up kind of like indirect. And it struck the top of the Tactical Operations Center one day, and part of the shrapnel came and hit Sergeant Jacobs. And hit him in the face pretty bad. He ended up surviving, getting taken out. Generally, though, we weren't taking any major casualties prior to that battle. There's a lot of close calls, and you always kind of laugh those off. It's always better to be lucky than good.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until after hindsight that it was like, oh no, those weren't just they were seeing our reactions. They were seeing what
Yep.
they were trying to get our SOPs and our reaction drills down. They were probing, they were testing. Like I said, I remember many a nights being there with Gallegos and Sergeant Kirk, and we would talk about, hey, if we're going to hit this place, how are we going to do it? And it's like, well, we're going to suppress the mortar pit. We're going to overwhelm the LRAS 1, the LRAS 2, Truck 2. We're going to overwhelm them with suppressive fire. And then we're going to push it on the front gate because that's the easiest access point. The Afghani National Guard guys we got with us, they're probably going to just surrender anyway, so we'll push through that. And I mean, literally the plan we came up with night after night was
prophecy.
Exactly the ones that
That's exactly what
pulled
happened.
on us.
So the morning everything went sideways. What was the date?
It was October 3rd, 2009.
And this is where the book starts, basically.
Yep. We talk a little bit about building the platoon prior to that, which was, I think, a big component to the story, too. If it wasn't for the time I spent with Sergeant Larson, knowing Gallegos from years before, getting in trouble with him back in Fort Knox at reclass school, having almost a year training time with Lieutenant Bunderman to have that trust. Because Bunderman, that was his first combat deployment ever. He ends up being the on-the-scene commander. Normally we'd have our troop commander there just by happenstance the night before he got taken away. And so that night before the attack, literally Stoney Portis calls Bunderman and it's like, hey, they're not going to drop me back off. You're the commander for the next day or two until I get back. Then all of a sudden, this cherry lieutenant, first time being in a combat zone, graduate from the University of Minnesota history major, is the guy that day coordinating everything going on tactically, which I said wouldn't have anybody else in the room besides Bunderman.
Wow. So it was 56 against how many?
They estimated the fighters were about 400 by the time they.
And they got the high ground.
I got the high ground, got us surrounded. Like I said, it's not just one or two things that happen. Normally we'd have drone support and air coverage that would give us that early warning because as you set at the bottom of a valley, you call it dead space. As you're looking up, you can't see behind a ridgeline or a mountain. You need higher elevation to look behind it. Well, normally they would provide that with drone support, but just a couple of weeks before, our wonderful soldier called Bo Berdahl decided to take off. So all that air coverage got scrambled looking for him. So the night before, that allowed them to move in right on top of us without being detected or seen. They cleared out the entire village of Armul from the civilians, staged out of that area, and like I said, at 06, they kicked it off. And I said I was still in my bunk. I'd just gotten off sergeant of the guard, so I was the night before I was in charge, going around making sure everybody's awake, alert. We got shifts rotating out, making sure guys are getting to their proper positions. And I'd gotten off that about, I think it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So I had just started getting back to sleep before I had to hit my other shift when it kicked off. And it was weird because, we'd dub about 6 o'clock in the morning. We'd just kind of dub that our Taliban alarm clock time. Like they'd normally be shooting to wake you up.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as they heard the gunfire come in, and I remember, all right, here we go again. And I threw my kit on, but as I'm sitting there listening, and waiting for my radio to power up, I just have that sense. It's like this isn't the same. Because normally, if they shot at us, you would go into what's called a cyclic rate of fire, meaning our defensive positions with our machine guns, we would try to shoot back more bullets than they could shoot at us to gain that fire superiority, to get that momentum and keep their heads down. And as I'm listening, I'm like, there's more coming in than going out. This isn't good. And as that radio powers up, I can hear every defensive position, from Gallegos to Hart, to Gregory, to Copus. They're all stepping on themselves, calling overwhelming enemy fire. We are suppressed. We're cyclic rate. We're going black on. I mean, they were trying to shoot back, but the enemy had them so well pinned and kind of so well fixed that they just could not gain any of that momentum. And then, of course, right away, we hear Kevin Thompson's hit at the mortar pit. Because as we come to find out, like the first shot that came in was Kevin was going out to check the 120 mortar tube to make sure that morning, it's ready to be. It's just the mortars would set it up because they knew typically where we would get hit from, so they could literally just walk out and start dropping rounds on the enemy. And as he was kind of sitting there, I guess, making sure it was laid in properly, he had gotten taken out. And right away, they suppressed the entire mortar pit, so we couldn't get that indirect fire. We had observation post Fritchie that set on top of the hill that our white platoon manned. They were in a knife fight, too. They were on the verge of getting overran because normally they could give us their 120 mortar support as well, as long as they weren't tied up. Well, the enemy was tying them up, so we couldn't get support from them. Our direct fire was ineffective because of the Bo Bergdahl thing. Like I said, they moved all the aircraft farther south, so we knew any close air support normally would take about 20 minutes. We knew we had about an hour at least before they'd even be on station. And
what are you thinking at this point? Is it salvageable or is it just unknowable?
Right now, it's just like, okay, game on. Let's go do this. Let's get an assessment. Let's figure out what's going on. Okay, it's pretty intense, but that's life. And at that point, like I said, I had the platoon sergeant of Red Platoon, our platoon, had, like I said, he was on leave that time. We just started rotating our guys back for, we call it mid-tour leave. You'd get about 10 days back home in a 12-month period. So we had 3 of the guys already missing out of our 18-man platoon, so we're really down to like 15. So you're trying to operate with even less guys than you normally have. And I was the senior NCO in the platoon, so I was acting as the platoon sergeant for the fight. And normally that position, my job is just to figure out where the guys are and what do they need. It's not really a tactical position job. I'm not sitting there trying to move chess pieces. I'm trying to be just the offensive coordinator of who needs what to go where.
All right. The battle goes on for a couple days?
About 15 hours.
Does it ebb? Does it flow? Is it constant?
The first, like I said, time sometimes stood still and disappeared in a moment. It felt like about the first 8 hours was no matter what, you were just constant, just hitting that wall every step you took.
Losing guys as you go? As
we go. Right away, Sergeant Kirk's trying to take a team out to reinforce Gallegos and Larson out to the west. He gets hit, taken out. The enemy had done their research. Blue Platoon, their role normally during something like this was to resupply those trucks with ammo. Well, the enemy had a sniper trained on Blue Platoon barracks doors. So as soon as Specialist Scusa literally steps out the door, he goes down. Like I said, we're losing guys just dropping. The additional gun trucks that we'd have to reinforce have now ran out of ammo. We can't get ammo back to them. Those guys are trying to fall back. But the 35 to 40 Afghan Army soldiers we had, from first shots fired, they basically threw their weapons down and just did him out. Ended up being literally the only gun left in the fight was Specialist Copus on the eastern side with a Mark 19. Said we had no idea when close air support was getting there. All we knew was just Kevin was hit, Kirk was hit, Scusa was hit, guys were coming back, peppered in shrapnel, near miss with bullets, trying to just figure out what the heck's next.
How much of Keating is burning at this point?
Right away, like I said, as the Afghan National Army guys left that eastern side, Taliban came in and just started firebombing their barracks. So at this point, and I don't know if this is basically the first 45 minutes in, we've already lost basically 3 guys. Most of the Afghan side, the Afghan Army side of the base is burning to the ground. And we're still trying to figure out what we're doing. So trying to come up with just, all right, well, I can't have you standing outside here. Anywhere you're outside, you're open, open invite for getting shot at. Because every time we'd do patrols would be, maybe 100, 200 meters up in the mountains, and you could look down and see everything on that outpost. There was not a spot you could stand outside or try to find outside that they couldn't see you from at least 1 or 2 angles. And since they had us on all 3 sides, or on 360 degrees, the one position you might be clear from the north, you're taking fire from the south. Just pandemonium and chaos. But at the same moment, I don't know, for me it was just, and I know this is going to sound a little jaded and weird. To me, I don't I don't remember like being scared or thinking, oh shit, this is over or anything like that. It was just like, okay, well, they got us there. I'll figure something else out. And said my fear wasn't ever, oh, they're going to shoot me or I'm not going to go back home to see mama and the kids. It was just like, holy crap.
I'm losing this chess game. That's interesting. Interesting move.
Yeah.
Didn't see that one.
And it's crap. I can't get to Gallegos. I can't get to the mortars. That's scaring the shit out of me.
Yeah.
That's terrifying me. Because as I'd told my guys, a couple of things I would always tell them before going overseas. Hey, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. So I will have your back no matter what. You pull that trigger first. Don't be afraid to save your buddies, because I'd rather you be judged by a jury of 12 than carried by 6 of us.
It is impossible to hear that and not think about the withdrawal, to think about the fact that we had him, man. Mm-hmm. We had him. It's impossible to hear that and not think about Butler, Pennsylvania, and think, you had him. And honestly, Clint, I think that's what we were kind of talking around when we started this. A bottom-up solution in combat that's rooted in trust. Trust in the person next to you, in your unit, in your platoon, whatever, versus I'm just going to wait to be told what to do.
Yep.
And for the life of me, man, I just wish there was some kind of instruction manual that could draw a bright and obvious line that would allow us to look back in hindsight and go, oh, see, that's why that's wise. That's why that worked. But it never works that way.
No.
We always look back and go, oh, God, it's so obvious now. But anyway, okay, so you're all in. Your mission no longer has anything to do with anything other than your guys.
Well, and that was the beautiful thing from the day we got there was the attitude of those men, especially from the lower enlisted, Copus and Mace and Jonesy and them. Like I said, everybody knew that location was just atrocious. And there's scribed on one of our pillars, one of our beams in our barracks room was this stupid saying that said it never gets better.
I actually love that.
And those young men, like I said, that was my 3rd combat deployment going into it, 10 years. I was already pretty crockety and an old NCO that lived off nothing but nicotine and caffeine. And I love the scene, and we were soldiers now with Sergeant Major Plumley. Great day, Sergeant Major. How do you know what kind of that's like that's the type of NCO I was kind of known for, is my rough around the edges.
But I want to just dwell on the language for a minute, because that's another great example of what we're talking about. It never gets better. Sounds like it would be self-defeating.
Yep.
It sounds kind of negative. It's like, hey, man, this is not go team. This is not a morale builder. But it's actually honest. And when the guys, I would think that the thing you're most desperate for out there in a situation like that isn't a bowl of warm milk. It's something authentic, something that feels like genuine.
Real. And
so you guys were like writing that in the barracks. You were that was popping up everywhere. And by the way, you mentioned spy versus spy earlier too. So now I get it, dude.
Yeah.
You're a subversive. You're right. I mean, because that stuff had to chap your COs.
It did not make our more senior leadership, because they looked at it in that kind of jaded light that, oh, you guys are just so.
It's going to get better.
No,
we're on an adventure.
And it was, like I said, guys like Copus and guys like Mace and Jonesy that embraced it. Like, well, it's never going to get better, because right here, right now, every day is the best day I'm ever going to have in my life. It can never get better. And it was interesting, like I said, doing the book. I said I had help with the ghostwriter, and we went around the country. It was almost 2 years interviewing these guys, and they would tell them, "Hey, how was life at Fort Keating?" And like, "Oh, we didn't have power most of the time, and we had sand fleas, and we had lice, and we all these horrible things. We only got a hot meal maybe once a week. We got a shower once every no, we got a hot meal like once every 3 days. We got a shower like once a week because we're on limited rations for water and everything. We had the first sergeant still bitching, why aren't you guys clean shaven? It's like, if I can only shower once a week, it's kind of hard to, and he would get done, and hearing all their stories of just kind of the ruggedness of what we had to go through. And Kevin would ask, well, man, how'd you feel about that? Just horrible. And each and every one of them, man, I'm so proud of them. They would look him straight in the eyes and with a smile on their face, what are you talking about? That was the 3 best months of my life. What just an amazing mentality and attitude.
You said something before about the sand fleas,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember in the book you talked about guys wearing flea collars around their ankles
And wrists.
I was like, what? I mean, that's how bad it was.
It was, like I said, it was just logistically a tough location. And priorities would go to water, bullets, food, and then it was the creature comforts later on if the pilots would want to supply us. Right. And in hindsight, that's one of those moments where, so Larson is, when you read in the book, he ends up getting direct selected. He just retired actually last month, but he ends up getting direct selected and he becomes a Chinook pilot. Now,
Sorry, direct selected. What's this?
So he was enlisted and it was General McChrystal that said, hey, you're smart enough, you're going to go be an officer.
Oh, okay.
Big deal. And Larson was amazing human being. Love that guy to death. Say I get to go see him next week, so have to tease him some. But he ends up being that Chinook pilot, the same Chinook pilots that we hated because they would make every excuse not to come see us because they would only come at night and only when it was dark, and they'd be like, oh, yeah, we're going to bring you a resupply. Oh, no, we got diverted. And they'd wait till just before sunup in the morning and be like, oh, it's getting too light. We can't show up. And we're like, oh, here we go another 3 or 4 days before we'll get resupply on water or any food or any of that. So we were so upset with them back at that time. I don't know if the website's still open, but there was a website called poopcenter.com and we'd got on there and you could send fecal material from various things. So we sent them elephant dung as a token of how much we appreciated their hard work. Larson goes and becomes a Chinook pilot, and I asked him after he graduated and had been flying, and he'd done a tour back over in Iraq by then, and hey, so were those guys were they really that, he's like, brother, I've been to Fort Keating. Roles were reversed. I'd tell you guys to go F off. I'm not flying in there.
I bet.
It's like, oh. He's like, those guys, anytime they came, those guys were so heroic and so brave. You don't realize how much they risked their lives.
They're flying into a fishbowl.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Just to bring us some water. Like, and that, I mean, funny in hindsight now, at the time, a little jaded on that, but it really put in perspective, man.
It is the small things, Chuck. It's a good point. You don't, when you sign up, you don't think maybe I'll be wearing a flea collar
or
around
4 of them,
my ankle, But it's also like the business of standing a post. I don't think most civilians really understand that. I mean, we've all heard the old maxim, moments of incredible boredom punctuated by sheer terror. We kind of get that. It's a bit like crab fishing, with bullets. But like the preface of this thing does a great job of capturing just the monotony of this critical job. You're out there. You are the eyes and ears. You've got everybody's life in your hands, and but your mind will go where it goes. And if you have a magazine to distract yourself, at anything, it's just people just like try standing still or sitting still for 4, 5, 6 hours. Most people can't do that.
No, it's a blessing and a curse to be able to kind of shut your mind off to the mundane, but still be alert enough to have your buddies count on you and rely on you. And that's what I loved about combat, and I don't mean to glorify combat in any way. It was that connection you made with your guys on such a level. Like, you would have so many random conversations, like, hey, who was your hottest teacher growing up? What was the most trouble you got into at high school? What was the dumbest thing you've done? I mean, you learn so much about your brothers to your left and right. You can't find that anywhere else. And for us, I know especially there, it wasn't, hey, we're at Fort Keating because we're here defending America, or whoever's politically in charge at the time. It's for God and country, any of that. No, it was like, dude, I'm in the suck with you. You're in it with me. We're here for each other. Screw all that other noise, because the only thing important in life right now is us together.
Warts and all. Yep. Embrace the suck.
And your feet smell like corn nuts, Raz.
You got shot? Shrapnel?
Yeah, I call that I didn't duck fast enough. It came a point where we'd been cut off from the ammo supply point, running out of ammo. It was just a terrible situation, what was happening over at LRAS 2. That's where, like I said, my good buddy Larson, he was originally on that 50 cal truck, trying to defend that western side. Mace had went over there to reinforce them. Sergeant Gallegos had been over there. Sergeant Martin, our mechanic, ended up in that vehicle too, as well as Ty Carter. And they were cut off, couldn't get back, ran out of ammo. The 50 cal had been blown out of Larson's hands by an enemy rocket-propelled grenade. And like I said, things were just going from bad to worse, but it's always one of those things, if we can do something, let's do it. Might not be the greatest idea, but again, another little thing I like to tell the guys, a wrong choice is better than no choice.
Right.
By doing nothing, nothing happens. At least if you mess up, you can learn from that, hopefully. So make a mistake, make a poor choice over a no choice. So that's when I said at that point we'd basically consolidated down. We weren't quite in the Alamo position yet, but we kind of had guys in the barracks waiting to be directed where to go.
I assume that means the last stand position.
Yep, that's Alamo position, and it's that last stand. Hey, we're just going to defend, this last little bit. And when I went into barracks, that's when I seen Specialist Gregory. He had a Mark 48 machine gun. We had about 200 rounds, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of a weirdo. I like machine guns, so I told him, hey, give me your gun. You be my assistant gunner, meaning he'll feed me the ammo. We were able to sneak out. We get to this. It was like a 60K generator that was looking out toward the west, and we were able to sneak around. We threw that up on the generator, and that's when I called Gallegos, because we still had radio communication at the time. And I'm like, hey, brother, I'm going to give you suppressive fire. You need to displace and get back. So Gregory loads me up with that first 100 rounds, and this is really the first time I get a good look out to the west. And you've got the putting green straight to the west. You got the switchbacks a little southwest. You have the village or our mole, and then you have the north face to the north, and then the diving board to the south. And as I'm sitting there in this 180-degree kind of look, like it's like ants coming down the mountain. Like there are so many muzzle flashes and movements and guys bounding and over. And the fighters, they were doing all the same tactics we did. Like they knew, put a machine gun position here, come around and flank you on the left. Like they were not just your man jam.
Punks.
Nope, they were. You could see generations of war fighters all the way going back to Hannibal in those guys in the mountains. And as soon as, like I said, to get the gun up in the first 100 rounds, it's just trying to go from target to target to target, burning through that 100 rounds like it's nothing, and calling Gallegos and was like, brother, you got to move. I'm giving you suppressive fire. You've got to move. You got to move now. And he's just calling back, and he's like, brother, you can't bring enough firepower. We can't move. And like I said, going back and forth, trying to go to target, call him. Get through that first 100 rounds. Gregory loads me with the next set of 100. And so just trying to call Gallegos, trying to get those guys to move. And they just keep coming back. Can't do it. Made the mistake that I used to have all these stupid little lessons. And I'd try and teach guys, like, don't put your blinders on. Your head's always got to be on a swivel. But I was just so super focused on trying to knock down targets, I didn't realize the front gate had been breached, that it had been abandoned after Kirk had gotten hit. Enemy had free access to come through the north, through the front gate. So they come around with a RPG team, outflank us. And I'm sitting there, like I said, just engaging out to the west and on the north side. Luckily, maybe that RPG was made on a Friday or something right before the end of work, because it came up a little short and hit the generator. And that took the main part of the blast. Peppered me on my right side, threw me onto Gregory. Dazed for a sec, kind of shook it off, grabbed Gregory, dusted him off, made sure he was good. He said, yep. Told him, you take off running, grabbed the machine gun, handled that, then focused back out to the west and called Gregory and, brother, I can't hold this position. Like, I'm out of ammo. They got me outflanked. If you can move now. And I just
Are you by yourself at this point?
Yeah. 'Cause I'd sent Gregory back because there's no reason for both of us to be there if something were to go real bad. So,
Clint, something already went real bad. I don't know. Google real bad, Chuck, and just see what comes up.
it's all about perspective, right?
Dude, I just don't even know. I mean, I'm trying to put myself in your place. You're alone, like ants on a hillside, muzzle flashes everywhere. You send your buddy back to safety. You hunker down and you keep squeezing off rounds at the muzzle flashes until all the rounds are gone.
It's simple.
All right, now what?
Now, as the last little bit of rounds kind of go across that feed tray cover and give Gallegos the last call. If you don't move now, I can't do anything for you. And he just calls back and simply says, brother, well, we'll be here when you come get us. And like I said, that's one of those moments where, man, it's weird to think about how combat can show you so much love. Like, that dude trusted me so much, and I knew if those roles were reversed, that dude was going to come get me no matter what. Like, there's so many precious moments of love in combat you don't understand till you're in that moment. And I just said, okay, we'll see you when we see you, and was able to displace back and get back to the barracks. Like I said, that things were just going bad to worse at that point. It's like, crap, we're out of ammo now. We're cut off from the ammo supply point. And then I remember going in, trying to check on Sergeant Kirk, and that's when I get the thumbs down that he wasn't going to make it. Go back into the barracks, trying to just get an assessment, trying to figure out what the next move is, and that's where I see Sergeant Stanley and Sergeant Hart. They're sitting there and they're arguing. I'm kind of bewildered because it's like, not a time to argue. Let's figure something out. And that's when Stanley just points at me and he's like, Sergeant Hart, go talk to Sergeant Romesha. And Hart comes over and he's like, hey, brother, I got an idea. What is it? He's like, we found some more 50 cal ammo because we'd gotten in trouble. I got to back up a little. We gotten in trouble because we were kind of squirreling ammo in our barracks prior to this, which is kind of a no-no because if your barracks gets hit, you don't want a whole bunch of rounds in there to create, little 4th of July action. So we'd gotten yelled at a few weeks before and had to clear some of that stuff out. But just like any good, there's a right way, there's a wrong way, and there's a look the other way. Some of that had gotten left there because someone was looking the other way.
And besides, it doesn't get any better.
No. And Hart goes, we found some more 50 cal ammo. I think I can sneak out to truck 2 and we'll take an armored Humvee over to get Gallegos. And I don't know if me and Hart argued for 30 seconds or 20 minutes. I just kept telling him, brother, I just got blown off the generator. I can't secure your right flank. I can't secure your left flank. I can't secure your 6. I've got no way to help you. And Hart was one of those soldiers. Like, no was not in his vocabulary. Like, it just did not register. You couldn't tell that kid no for nothing. And he understood risk versus reward. If there was any, no matter how slim a chance for success, even if the risk was super, super high, well, there's a chance of success. So let's go do it.
Maybe he knew he couldn't live with himself if he didn't try.
And when I finally told him, when he walked out the back of those barracks, I knew that was the last I'd see of him. And like I said, that goes back to those moments. I mean, you just hit it right there. That love and that loyalty. Like, those are the moments. Said a lot of bad stuff happened those days, and as I reflect back, and that's what I like to share, though, is those moments. That the love for your brother. Like I said, I knew him walking out the back of those doors would be the last I'd ever see of him. And somehow they made it to that truck. They got it loaded up. They got that 50 cal rocking. They got pushing over. And then the call comes across the radio of Hart. The last transmission he says is they got an RPG pointed right at me. And then nothing. It's one of those moments where it's just like, shoot.
You knew,
what?
But you hadn't experienced it. And they experienced it, and yeah.
But as I like to think back, though, I'm just, like I said, talk about those brave arms. That, for me, was one of those moments, man, I'm glad I didn't just crumple and say, darn. It was, we could still do something. We're getting our nose punched in. Everything's going sideways. but we can still do something.
It's the guts of an adventure. And, you know, it makes no sense to assume needless risk. But most risk, you said it earlier, this kid understood risk and reward. And people calculate it differently. This isn't actuarial accounting. This is something else. And it's alchemy in a way. I don't know that. I think the reason people write books and poems and songs about these things is because it's very difficult to sum up. But it's the essence of kind of everything, it seems. It's a great book, man. And I just want to pivot to a couple of things. You were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. And what in the world did that feel like? This kid who's tired of milking cows, all of a sudden.
I said it was weird and awkward. Like I said, I'd got back from that deployment. I'd already made that choice that I was going to get out of the Army. I was finally going to grow up and figure out what I was going to do with my life. So after 12 years of service, before that deployment, I'd already, at that time, my first wife had made the decision, hey, this is going to be my last hoorah. I'll spend my last year in, make that transition out, figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And that's where I found myself, like so many other veterans, on that way out the door. My plan A fell through. My plan B fell through. I was trying to be, I tried to get a job at Department of Energy's Transportation Security for Nuclear Waste. That all fell through. And as I stepped out the door in 2011, I found myself going to chase oil fields up in North Dakota. Said I was not going to go to college. That was not going to be my calling. And like I said, I had so many of my other peers and stuff that had gotten out that did that college route they were so angry and bitter that I'm in these classes with these 18, 19-year-old kids that are complaining how hard their life is.
Can you imagine?
And
you survive Keating and you're sitting there
listening to
come on.
Kids needing safe spaces because people are using harsh language. Like, anyway. I went up North Dakota chasing oil fields. First job,
Williston, Bakken?
Minot. But yeah, we operated out of Tioga, Williston area. First job up there, I was a swamper on a hydro excavator truck. I knew I had to start somewhere, and shoot, they were paying $75 a day per diem and $21 an hour.
Sold.
I was golden. I paid more in taxes my first month working in the oil field than I made as a staff sergeant at 12 years of service. And it was awesome because I'd be on overtime by the time it was Wednesday. And what I didn't think at the time was any of those skills that I had in the military would transfer over. That's when I found out right away. Like, the HR guy loved hiring veterans because we could, show up to work.
Look at that.
Show up to work on time and pass a drug test.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I went, got my CDL, started driving the trucks, figured my way through life. And I was out for 2 years. And don't hold this against me, but I did make the transition. I became a field safety specialist.
Mm-hmm.
So,
the irony.
Oh, I know.
What are you, 31 at this point, maybe?
Oh, shoot, you're making me do math.
Went in at 18, did 12, came out for 2?
28, I think, Keating. Yeah, it would have been, early 30s. And it was funny, the reason I ended up being safety, because I asked the safety manager, why would you hire me? I'm the most unsafe guy you know. And he goes, well, you know what wrong looks like.
Let's avoid that, shall we?
And then he's like, I like you guys with the military because you have tactfulness to actually tell people and not just write out safety violations. You understand risk versus reward, and there is a way to get this job done, and you don't try to shut the stuff down, which is a whole different story. But I'm sitting out there in the oil field one day, minding my own business, trying not to fall asleep in my pickup truck because that's what safety guys try not to do. And all of a sudden my phone rings, and I look over, and it's a number I don't recognize, but I'm a safety guy. I'm bored. Figured maybe it's a telemarketer I can mess around with while I'm watching the pipeline guys backfill some trenches that day, and answer the phone. And on the other end of the line, I hear, hey, this is Colonel Davis, G1 from the Pentagon. First thought, it's, oh, crap. What'd I do? Statute of limitations should be up by now.
Right.
It's been 2 years. And like I said, when we got back from Keating, my commander, who wasn't there, came up and told me, hey, I heard what you did. I'm thinking about putting you in for a Distinguished Service Cross. And I looked at Captain Porter, and I told him, "You're the commander, sir. You do what you do. We got 9 more months. We got to get these boys home." And I kind of put all that stuff in the back of my mind, and that was another super awesome moment, was watching every man from Red Platoon push through another 9 months of combat, and all came home, and are all still here to this day. Knock on wood. We have yet to lose a guy from Red Platoon because of suicide.
It's terrific.
And it's because we always talk crap to each other.
Yeah.
And keep in touch. But I had no idea until I got that call, and it's, "Hey, Colonel Davis, G1 Pentagon." He asked me to identify. He's like, "Hey, we need you to come out to D.C." I said, "Well, I'm working 6 to 7 days a week. I mean, shoot, my first stint in the oil, I worked 48 days straight when I first got up there. That was awesome paychecks back then." And I said, I don't have really any vacation days. I got 6, 7 days a week. I'm thinking he's just wanting to bait me in to get me back there so the MPs can arrest me or something.
You seriously think you're in Dutch?
Normally, yeah. That's, I said, well, we talked about, I would avoid the upper chain of command.
Right.
And I said, well, I'll talk to my boss and I'll get back to you. I think I waited maybe like 2-3 weeks before I went and talked to my boss. I'm like, "Hey, got this thing that kind of popped up. I might have to go to DC for something." And, "Oh, what for what?" And the guys in the oil field knew I was a veteran. They didn't know what I did. Because just like my dad and my grandfather.
Who are you going to talk to?
Put that stuff in the back of your mind and put your nose to the grindstone and just get back to life. I can't change any of that stuff. And like I said, so that was a process in which I was dealing with. And so eventually I did go to D.C., and that's when they set me down. And as I remember getting to the Pentagon, they sent me down, and there's all this brass all over, colonels and generals. And like I said, normally if I had to go see anything above a colonel, that meant one of my guys was in some serious trouble, and it was not going to be a good day. So I'm sitting there now. I'm in the room with 2-star, 3-star generals and full-bird colonels, and they're all congratulate this and thank you for that. And as I sat down, I've got 3 posters in front of me. So they have told me nothing. In my mind, I'm thinking, well, it's probably for whatever happened that one day, and they're probably going to downgrade maybe that DSC that Stoney Porter's talked about to maybe a Silver Star or something. They're just going to hand it to me, shake my hand, congratulate me, and I'll be on my way, and I'll just get back to
Silver
work.
Star, Distinguished Service above that,
and then Medal of
the
Honor.
Medal of Honor at the top.
And those 3 posters, as I sat down, of course, Army's got their PowerPoint presentation going on because they're never going to back away from doing something like that. I see Sal Junta, the first living recipient since Vietnam, from Afghanistan, 173rd Airborne guy. Next one is Leroy Petrie, Ranger, saved his guys, lost his right arm, saving his guys from a grenade. And the third one was Sergeant Sabo, Vietnam posthumous MOH. And I'm kind of like a peanut character in class, and all I'm hearing is want.
Yeah.
And I finally look up and I call a timeout, and I'm like, "Hey, what's all this? What is all this Medal of Honor stuff?" And one of the colonels looks over and he's like, "Oh, you don't know Sergeant Romesha?" And I'm like, "Wouldn't be asking a question I'm going to answer to." I got told I got put in for a DSC, so why am I looking at MOH stuff? And they go, "Well, you've been recommended for upgrade. Short of the president signing your award, you'll be receiving the Medal of Honor." And I remember just kind of looking back down and looking up, and I'm like, "Well, for what? I didn't do anything special. I just did my job." It's like I had 8 guys that gave up their life so I could be sitting in this chair right now. So I don't understand this. And they started, and I just shut down at that point, just turned everything off. And that's when I got to meet, the first recipient I ever met in my life was General Foley, retired 3-star Vietnam. I sat down and I got to chat with him for about 2 hours, and that was one of the first questions. I'm like, "Sir, why me? Like, I didn't do anything special." And he kind of cuts me off, and he goes, "Clint, it's like, we talked to your guys, and it was based on their recommendation. We asked them, do you believe that Sergeant Romesha deserves something more?" And they all said yes. And to me, that put into perspective, man, if my guys believe that I did something good, all right, I can accept that. On a personal level, though, it still was tough, especially right then, because I'd put all that stuff in the back of my mind, and all of a sudden people are calling me a hero, and they're just all this stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, no, heroes are those guys that don't come home. I was a warrior, and I was a warrior around 52 other great warriors, and 8 of those warriors turned into heroes, not me. said, and all that came out initially and came flooding back. And
this, like, are you in the Pentagon at this point? Are you in the?
We went over at the time. General Foley was still in charge of Army Emergency Relief, the big nonprofit for the kind of the Army.
But you're in a conference room with a bunch of big shots who are explaining to you why you deserve a thing.
And I'm just sitting there thinking, I mean, let me just crawl under a rock. Let me get out of here. I don't want this. I said I got to go home shortly after, and of course I'm calling my buddies back up and that was the other great thing about working in the oil. I got to drive 76 miles one way to work. Every morning I'd get to call one of those guys, talk to either Stanley or Larson or Raz or Copus or Jonesy, guys that were either still in. So for me, that transitional kind of therapy, I got to talk to every one of my guys almost every day. I didn't have that kind of break where a lot of guys did, where they get that isolation. And even though I'm living up in Minot, North Dakota, I mean, you just get spread to the four winds as time goes on, but it's that constant communication. To me, that was always, my guys used to kind of razz me. He's like, hey, did you ever get your, anything for that day? I don't know. Well, Raz, you got your Silver Star, right? Yeah. Larson, you got your, yeah. Bunderman, you got DSC, right? Yeah. Okay, well, don't worry about me. Let's keep going forward. Like that's the thing I've noticed too is the guys that have struggled the most are unfortunately the guys that can't get out of the past. They don't know what tomorrow brings because they're too worried about, hey, remember back when, man, life was so much greater when we were, well, life's still great now. If you don't, you've got to find out what tomorrow is going to bring. Because as I like to talk to them, and I can't change anything in the book of Clint. Like all those chapters have long been written.
Right.
I can't change them. I can't rewrite them. I can just reread them, learn from them. The only chapter I can influence is what's happening tomorrow. I can write that one.
And besides, it doesn't get any better than this. It's weird. There's this ecosystem now that I don't know how I've stumbled into it, but there's so much triangulating. Evan Hafer over at Black Rifle Coffee. I know you guys have a history. I just ran into a guy named Jay Orvis, a writer, who's one of the founders of Black Rifle. Saw him up in Salt Lake on this totally unrelated thing. Jack Carr.
Oh,
right. Travis Mills. I don't know if you've crossed paths with him. And then our Pure Talk sponsors this podcast, and they told us about you and sent us your book and said you were doing some work for them. So part of my question is, what are you doing now? How are you taking all of this and using it in a sensible way, or maybe a better word is a practical way? You've mentioned veteran suicide a couple of times, and we do what we can to shine a light on that, but damn, it's hard to look at. It's been like I said, it's been a blessing and a curse. Never in a million years did I ever think I'd be a recipient or be in a position to have a platform. And that was part of the struggle when I first got it. I just wanted to put my head in the sand and just wanted to get back to being Clint. And I realized that was very selfish. I've been blessed with something that gives me a platform that so many other veterans will never have the opportunity for. And through that, I've been blessed to meet and interact with great organizations, great people. Pure Talk, I've been a brand ambassador for them for going on 2 years now. An amazing American-owned company that's keeping jobs here in the U.S., that is ran by military values and leadership, and they've been one of our great supporters for another nonprofit I work with, America's Warrior Partnership, where we were trying to connect veterans into local communities to help solve their problems, because as we look at the suicide issue that's going on, it's not just a mental health thing. It's so many things that contribute to it. Relationship issues, it's financial issues, especially in today's era with the ridiculous inflation and all the struggles that are going on now. And if we don't address those things, you can't just give one pill to solve everybody's problem. Pure Talk has been so just important to raising that awareness for American Warrior Partnership. I think we've had almost 400,000 individual donations from the customers out there. That's amazing. So they round their cell phone bill up at each month, to
help out AWP, and that goes back to service to country doesn't come from wearing a uniform. It comes from doing what you can. And that is such a blessing to see so many great Americans do what they can to support a company that, like I said, has those values of loyalty, honor, patriotism, that wants to keep jobs here, that wants to make affordable, quality products, that understand, competition elevates quality. I know, I want to say Pure Talk and Mike Rowe Works have came together, right?
Well, look, I met Reggie, the guy who runs the thing, and I had a lot of questions about his business. All he wanted to talk about was you and AWP. Now he did his time in Vietnam, and he cares deeply about this stuff too. But yeah, I said to him, look, I want, and you really kicked the door open for me on this when you said that, go figure. These veterans, they show up on time, they stay late. They're trainable. Right? It's like we need to build vet-friendly on-ramps into corporate America in a meaningful way. And I don't know what I can do with MicroWorks, but what I'd like to do is find ways to do that here and to make sure that so many people who come home know that there's money available and there are companies who love them and there are citizens like us, really, who feel awkward because we're indebted, and we don't want to just say thanks for your service and buy you a beer in an airport because nothing wrong with it. No. But right, it's like the people aren't quite sure what to say to a Medal of Honor recipient with a story like yours, in the same way that it's taken you a long time to figure out how to tell your story without feeling like a douchebag, right?
No.
It's like the whole conversation's hard, and if you really want to 10x it into difficulty, well, then let's talk about 21, 22 guys a day punching their own ticket because some form of essential communication has been broken, and they're not in touch with their guys the way you've stayed in touch with yours, And how can you fix that? I don't know, but it's going to take a bunch of people like-minded.
That's one of the, benefits and great things I've seen doing a lot of travel and troop visits and stuff. And like I said, there's not one size fits all. There's not one perfect way to do it. I've seen time and time again, though, how many veterans are making that transition and they want to be kind of the masters of their own destiny, but they don't know how to get there. Yeah. So one of the big things, like I said, I'm C's get degrees. I like working with these. I'm not that smart, but I can pick things up and put them down. To me, we are doing a grave injustice of not promoting more of the skills and the trades and to have a pipeline. And that's why I love going to do troop visits and talk to guys. Like, I went and worked oil fields. I worked with guys that literally walked out of high school, got into the oil fields, and are now project managers making $400,000, $500,000 a year with a GED. That to go to college and get that piece of paper means nothing. And we've got so many getting out of the trades now. Our oldest son, he's 18, going to graduate this year. He's going to go down to Bismarck College for HVAC and stuff. And it's like, if we could get more people willing to work and understanding these trades aren't a dirty job should be this derogatory thing. You want to be your own boss? Start being an electrician now.
No kidding.
Get into plumbing.
No kidding.
In 10 years,
yeah,
you're going to own your own company. You're going to dictate your own price.
And your own schedule.
Your own schedule. Like, I am all about that because, like I said, I love the fact that this country was built on that individual, just take care of your own stuff and learn how to do it. We got to get back to that.
I won't say you deserve it because that'll just make you blush, but I'm glad you took the call from D.C. I'm glad you showed up, and I'm glad you're out in the world spreading the good news because in the end, you've got a story to tell. That's what makes a book great, a story. And yours is bursting with story. Clint Romesha. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mike.
If you like what you heard,
and even if you don't,
won't you please,
pretty please, subscribe. Well, I hate to beg and I hate to plead, but please, pretty freaking please.